Yo, it's your boy Smoke back in the Madden video. Today's video we're going to be doing a Jayden Daniels career simulation. The former Heisman winner and second overall pick of the draft has been having a great rookie season and is most likely going to be Offensive Rookie of the Year. He does have a little bit of competition with Brock Bowers having a record-setting year, but it will probably go to Jayden Daniels considering he was able to get his team to the NFC Championship. Now, in a career sim, we obviously are just going to sim the entire career of the player, and we are starting with Jayden Daniels, but he has already played his first year, so this is his regular season stats of his first year, so this is his rookie season stats. So technically, we'd be starting the simming in year 2 of his career, but Jayden Daniels, as you can see right here, he had a rating of over 100, and he had 25 passing touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Rushing did very well. Also, with 6 rushing touchdowns, 891 rushing yards. 891 is quite a bit. And he did have 3 fumbles, but still very good. So the second year, Jayden Daniels is an 86 overall. He went up 1 overall because he was an 85 at the end of the last season. But yeah, 86 overall with Superstar Dev. Very good to see. He already has Superstar Dev. He was at Hidden because, you know, when you start a franchise, you need to play so many steps. But yeah, he was at Hidden, now he's at Superstar. And he's an 86. Commanders go 11-6 to make playoffs. That is a playoff appearance for Jayden Daniels right there. Weren't able to make it to the Super Bowl, though. So I go ahead and I sim to the Super Bowl just to see if they make it. Because, you know, if they make playoffs, yeah, that is impressive. But it doesn't really change the course of history for their career. So it looks like he actually missed a little bit of time in his sophomore season, as he had 2,664 passing yards, 22 passing touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Not horrible year, but yeah, you can check from the downs played. He only had 792. Backup played a little bit. So Jayden Daniels was hurt. I don't really know exactly what it was from, but he did not play the full season. Looks like he missed maybe 3 games. It wasn't a whole lot, but still. Rushing, Ryan Robinson with 922 rushing yards, 11 rushing touchdowns. Jayden Daniels was second on the team, leading. And then we got Terry McLaurin with 689 receiving yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. David Moore, 778 yards and 5 receiving touchdowns. McCole Hardman, 3 receiving touchdowns and 609 yards. Now entering the third year of Jayden Daniels' career, he's still at Superstar Dev. Obviously, he's not going to lose it this fast. I mean, he's not going to lose it for a while, even though he was injured. Still a very good year. Very productive. He went up 2 overalls. Kind of shocked he went up 2 overalls. He didn't do a whole lot, especially with that injury. But, I mean, he is young, so he's definitely going to start progressing. 10-7 record. The Commanders made playoffs again. Not able to make it to the Super Bowl, though, as it is the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Baltimore Ravens. 2 bird teams fighting it out. So, guess we'll see who the winner is in that matchup. Philadelphia Eagles made the Super Bowl in real life, though, obviously. Let's go ahead and check the stats on the year. So Jayden Daniels with 3,369 passing yards, 23 passing touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 70 completion percentage. Looks like he had a rating of 99.2. He was only sacked 29 times, which is not a lot. Pretty good year for Jayden Daniels, I will say. It's not bad at all. Brian Robinson is the leading rusher with 964 yards and 17 rushing touchdowns. 17 rushing touchdowns is very good. Jayden Daniels with 620 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. Devin Singletary, looks like he went from being a New York Giant to a Washington Commander, even though they're both in the same division. Devin Singletary with 269 yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. The Coldest Walker, so we're starting to get a few auto-generated names here. Coldest Walker with 5 receiving touchdowns, 815 yards. Wandale Robinson with 759 yards. And Terry McLaurin kind of had a down year, only 600-something yards for Terry McLaurin. So, Jayden Daniels is going up 1 overall. He's still a Superstar Dev, obviously. Only going up 1 overall, though. His progression is starting to slow down a little bit. I mean, he's still progressing, which is good, obviously, but starting to slow down a little bit. And the Washington Commanders go 8-9, and they're going to miss playoffs this year. So this is the first year of them not making playoffs, having Jayden Daniels as a starter. So they went the first 3 years of Jayden Daniels being a starter, making playoffs. The first year they're not making it. So I don't really know what's going on. I don't know if it's something with the roster or not. Obviously, we put it all on auto. We do not control the roster moves or anything like that. Jayden Daniels on the year, though, 3,565 passing yards, 23 passing touchdowns, 14 interceptions. Not a good year for Jayden Daniels right here. This is not a good year for him. Yeah, this was a pretty rough year for Jayden Daniels. A 67 completion percentage, which, I mean, that's not bad, but touchdown to interception ratio wasn't that great. Brian Robinson with 813 yards, 10 rushing touchdowns, and 2 fumbles. Jayden Daniels was 629 yards. He averaged 4.8 yards per carry, 6 rushing touchdowns, and no fumbles. Then looks like we got another auto-generated guy, Tavon Middlebrooks, 249 yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. Terry McLaurin is back to being on the top contributor in the receiving game with 1,011 receiving yards, 8 receiving touchdowns. Wan'Dale Robinson with 774 yards, 3 receiving touchdowns. Luke McCaffrey was able to get a receiving touchdown as well. Jayden Daniels is now in the 90-plus club, and I always say 90-plus, that is where you start to see the elite kind of players. So Madden is saying Jayden Daniels is going to be an elite kind of player. It's not very far-fetched after seeing the rookie year we just had from him. I will say, looking at his rookie numbers in real life, I thought they'd be a little bit better. Like, I don't know. I thought he would at least have a little bit more touchdowns than that. But, I mean, it was still a very good year. I mean, it wasn't bad at all by any means. Anyway, the Washington Commanders, not only do they make playoffs, they're in the Super Bowl. So the Commanders go 11-6, and they're in the Super Bowl facing the Baltimore Ravens. So let's go ahead. Jayden Daniels to Lamar Jackson. I would say Lamar is the most similar QB Jayden Daniels is like. I mean, I know there's only one Lamar Jackson, but he's kind of like a poor man's Lamar, I guess you could say. Anyway, Jayden Daniels with 4,019 yards. That is the highest amount of passing yards we've seen from him. This is also the highest amount of passing touchdowns we've seen from Jayden Daniels. 35 and only 7 interceptions. What such a beautiful number. You love when your quarterback can only throw single-digit interceptions. Brian Robinson, 871 yards and 14 rushing touchdowns. This guy loves those rushing touchdowns. Robinson's really good at that, apparently. Jayden Daniels, 593 yards. Terry McLaurin, the leading receiver again, with 1,096 yards and 14 receiving touchdowns. Wan'Dale Robinson with 826 yards and 4 receiving touchdowns. Devontae Walker, 810 yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. And the Washington Commanders are Super Bowl champions. So Jayden Daniels, it only took him 4 years, and he's already got a Super Bowl under his belt. He's going to be the Super Bowl MVP. And the Washington Commanders are a 4-time Super Bowl champion. They were able to take down Lamar Jackson. So that is actually really cool. I mean, we have had a career sim where people have won the Super Bowl, but it hasn't been this fast. I mean, this is definitely the fastest we have seen a Super Bowl winner in not only a rebuild, but also a career sim as well. Very interesting to see. Also very cool. Let's go and check out this yearly awards. NFL MVP, Brock Purdy. Offensive Player of the Year, Ladd McConkey. So not going to Jayden Daniels. Jayden Daniels is now up to a 94 overall, entering in the beginning of his 6th year. I mean, that's a Super Bowl MVP right there. So, yeah, I mean, obviously you could see an increase. So he went up 3 overall as superstar Dev. Kind of shocked he's not X Factor. Maybe they'll give it to him if he has another good year. But even though we just won the Super Bowl, we are 8-9, so I don't really know how that happened, but it's not that big of a deal. I mean, we did just win the Super Bowl. I'm not going to get too greedy now. But let's go and see how Jayden Daniels performed. Honestly, not that great. Looks like he missed 1 game, but still wasn't that good. Jayden Daniels, 20 passing touchdowns, 11 interceptions. This is a very bad year. I mean, like, for a starting quarterback, that's a bad year. That's a bad year for sure. Devin Middlebrooks, the auto-generated running back, 681 passing yards, 9 rushing touchdowns. And then Jayden Daniels, 456 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. Terry McLaurin, leading receiver again, but he wasn't able to get to 1,000, unfortunately. 940 yards for Terry McLaurin, 9 receiving touchdowns. Dakotas Walker, 3 receiving touchdowns, 725 yards. Looks like we got an auto-generated guy named Raymond. He had 769 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. All right, now the Washington Commanders, we are going to stop looking at Jayden Daniels going up and down in the rates, and we just do that the first couple of years to go in and see how he's progressing, but he's obviously going to keep progressing because he's young, and we'll go ahead and check the overall once it starts to go back down to earth. Washington Commanders weren't able to make too much noise this year, though. So Jayden Daniels putting up 3,646 passing yards, 26 passing touchdowns, and 9 interceptions, 71% completion. Really solid, really good amount of completion percentage, too. Middlebrooks with 592 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. Jayden Daniels with 6 rushing touchdowns off of 577 yards. Terry McLaurin was 778 yards, 6 receiving touchdowns. Dakotas Walker with 672 yards and 5 receiving touchdowns. Deshaun Rainan with 5 receiving touchdowns as well, and 658 yards. And Kevin Short, 565 yards and 4 receiving touchdowns. Washington Commanders are 5-12, so we are really starting to fall off right here. Hopefully it's not Jayden Daniels regressing. I hope not. It would be very early, especially for a quarterback, for someone to be regressing. Jayden Daniels, and this is probably the worst year we have seen from him. So 3,506 passing yards. Passing yards isn't bad, but the only 18 passing touchdowns, what are we doing here? That is way, way too low. 18 passing touchdowns, 7 interceptions. At least he had a low amount of interceptions, but still, the passing touchdowns is so low that it doesn't even matter. It really doesn't. It makes the ratio bad. Jayden Daniels was the leading rusher, though, of the entire season for the Commanders with 509 yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, and 0 fumbles as well. So that is good. He averaged 4.2 yards per carry. Middlebrooks with 482 yards, 3.5 yards per carry, 5 rushing touchdowns. Looks like we got Generals, another auto-generated guy. Looks like he is our backup running back. Deshaun Rayland is our leading receiver with 886 yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. Devontae Ramsey, 7 receiving touchdowns and 812 yards. Chuck Foster, 325 yards. The Commanders are back in the Super Bowl. Okay, so they made the playoffs like their first 4 years. Now they were in a little, and then they won the Super Bowl. They're the little drought now, but they are back, and now they are back in the Super Bowl. And it is the Commanders versus the Raiders, and we have seen this matchup before. I know it was a long time ago, but the Raiders and Commanders have faced each other in the Super Bowl before. Jayden Daniels, let's go and see how he did on the year. So 3,772 yards. 30 passing touchdowns, 7 interceptions, a completion percentage of 71%. Pretty solid. A passer rating of 111.9. And he was sacked 34 times, so he was sacked quite a bit that year. So that's not good, but Jayden Daniels is still making it work. Very low amount of interceptions also, I will say. Middlebrooks looks like he had 783 yards and 9 rushing touchdowns. Jayden Daniels, 527 yards. 1 rushing touchdown, 0 fumbles. I was going to say Middlebrooks kind of should be having more yards than that, but if Jayden Daniels is basically the starting running back on this team, if not, he's at least the running back too. I think that's no dispute there. Devontae Ramsey with 933 receiving yards with 10 receiving touchdowns. Then we got Rainan with 687 yards and 4 receiving touchdowns off of 54 receptions. Then we got Dakotas Walker with 666 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. So our receiving core isn't bad. Looks like they all get spread out the ball an even amount. Let's go and see who wins the Super Bowl, though. And it is not the Commanders, so Jayden Daniels is not a 2-time Super Bowl champion, at least not yet. Maybe he can have some time to redeem himself, but the Las Vegas Raiders are going to win this one. And it looks like the Super Bowl MVP is an auto-generated cornerback named Kevin Hewitt. So Kevin Hewitt is the Super Bowl MVP in the 2032 season, and the Las Vegas Raiders take down the Washington Commanders. The score 30-24. And let's check it at the yearly awards. Jayden Daniels is not on there, so that's not. I mean, it'd be nice if he could have a yearly award. I mean, he's having a really good career so far, but a few MVPs wouldn't hurt to have. We always want to see if they're a Hall of Fame kind of player. Jayden Daniels, let's go see how he does here. 3,489 yards, 23 passing touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. 69 completion percentage. And he was sacked 43 times. Now, that is actually a lot. 43 is actually a lot of times. That is pretty bad. So, Jayden Daniels does have random years like this where it's like, that's kind of mid or maybe a little bit below mid. And there's nothing special with that. And then he has years where he only has like 7 interceptions and 30 plus passing touchdowns. But let's go and see what he did on the ground. And he definitely made up for the season on the ground. 565 rushing yards with 7 rushing touchdowns. And that looks like he did almost better than our starting running back. And then Devontae Ramsey was 72 receptions, 801 yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. Deshaun Rainan, 51 receptions with 741 yards and 4 receiving touchdowns. Dakotas Walker with 6 receiving touchdowns off of 68 receptions with 723 yards. So, again, looking like the ball is getting spread out very evenly. And the Washington Commanders are 5-12. So they just made the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and now they're 5-12. I don't really understand how that really just can occur in Madden. I know I get it happens sometimes, but it seems like Madden simulation can just be wonky a lot of the time. Anyway, Jayden Daniels with 3,082 passing yards with 24 passing touchdowns and 10 interceptions with a 64 completion percentage. Even though that is oh my God, he was sacked 59 times. That is a lot. Still pretty impressive year. Then it looks like Shaquille Melstead, our leading running back, with 602 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Jayden Daniels with 529 yards, averaged 4.6 yards per carry. Didn't have a touchdown on the year, but he did have 2 fumbles, so that does kind of suck. Got a good amount of rushing yards, but no rushing touchdown and 2 fumbles kind of sucks. That is definitely going to hurt his ratio, his turnover ratio, but anyway, it's not that big of a deal. Devontae Ramsey, leading receiver with 1,012 receiving yards, 9 receiving touchdowns. Then Deshaun Rayland with 671 receiving yards and 5 receiving touchdowns. Daniel Wagner with over 500 yards receiving. Washington Commanders are going to go 9-8 in the next year. They're going to make playoffs, but they're going to be first-round exits. And the New York Giants are going to face the New England Patriots. So that's a very interesting matchup. Definitely one I don't think we'll see in the near future, but who knows? Jayden Daniels with 3,664 passing yards, 30 passing touchdowns, and 10 interceptions, a 68 completion percentage. And he was sacked 39 times. He had a passer rating of 105.8. Pretty impressive passer rating, especially, considering the yards and the passing touchdowns, because, not that it's bad by any means, but it's not like it's off the charts, but that is a pretty good passer rating. Then Shaquille Melstead with 885 rushing yards, and then 10 rushing touchdowns, 0 fumbles. Jayden Daniels with 580 yards and 7 rushing touchdowns and 0 fumbles. And then Sammy Smiley with 203 yards. So pretty impressive run game for the Commanders this year, even though they weren't able to make playoffs. Deshaun Rayland is the leading receiver now with 928 receiving yards, 8 receiving touchdowns. And then we got Devontae Ramsey with 834 yards and 5 receiving touchdowns. All right, now we're going to get into the next year, and the Washington Commanders are 8-9 again, and they're not going to be making playoffs. I feel like they have won 8-9 a million times now. But let's go ahead and check the stats. Maybe there'll be a little bit of hope. Maybe Jayden Daniels. Maybe he'll change teams. Who knows? Let's go ahead and check. Jayden Daniels with 3,177 passing yards, 21 passing touchdowns, and 11 interceptions, and a completion percentage of 65. And he was sacked 38 times. So this is what I mean. Jayden Daniels will just randomly have a mid-year like this. Shaquille Melstead with 853 yards and 10 rushing touchdowns, 2 fumbles. Jayden Daniels with 471 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, and 0 fumbles. Sammy Smiley with 172 yards. Larry Taylor was the leading receiver with 779 receiving yards and then 5 receiving touchdowns. Devontae Ramsey with 7 receiving touchdowns. So let's go ahead here and check out the next season. So 6-11, the Washington Commanders, we're 85 across the board, 85 on offense, 85 on defense, so an 85 overall. But let's go ahead and check everything because we need the Commanders to start making their ways back to playoffs. Jayden Daniels with 3,552 passing yards, 23 passing touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. That is not starting to look good. Keep in mind, we are in year 14. So experience. He has 13 years under his belt. Is Jayden Daniels going to be hanging the cleats up soon? Or is he just still getting started? I mean, he still could go to a new team if the Commanders ever want to get rid of him. Jayden Daniels with 590 rushing yards, 0 fumbles, but he did have 6 rushing touchdowns. And then Milstead got 526 yards and 6 rushing touchdowns, 1 fumble. And then Sammy Smiley right there. And now let's go to look at Devontae Ramsey's numbers. Devontae Ramsey with 897. And then Devontae Ramsey actually did pretty good for us, even though he was obviously our leading receiver. I feel like he is going to be the next step. He's going to be this generation's Terry McLaurin in this auto-generated world, obviously, since this is not real life. Let's go and check out Jayden Daniels did this season, though. Could have did a lot better, but that's a good amount of passing yards with 3,425, 24 passing touchdowns, but 15 interceptions. I think that is a career high in a season of interceptions by Jayden Daniels thrown. So that is kind of not good to see. Sacked 41 times. God, I really wish the auto-generated, GM would kind of help fix this O-line or something, because Jayden Daniels is really starting to get sacked. Shaquille Milstead with 585 yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, and 1 fumble. Jose Gibson with 516 yards on the ground, and Jayden Daniels on the ground. There he is, 510 yards, average 4.2 yards per carry, 7 rushing touchdowns, and only 1 fumble. Very good year for Jayden Daniels, rushing and passing. Actually, passing was a little rocky because he had the 15 interceptions, but pretty good year rushing for Jayden Daniels. Devontae Ramsey, he on 76 receptions got 934 yards and 8 receiving touchdowns. So Jayden Daniels, we're coming near the end of his career. Just wanted to point this out. This will most likely be his last year, but he's going to change teams for his last year. So he is done being a Commander, and he's done with the Washington Commanders. He is now a New York Jet. Let's go and see how the Jets do now. In the 2039 postseason, the Jets are first-round exits to the Indianapolis Colts with a score of 13-17, and that does sound like a score that would happen if the Jets were in playoffs. So I guess that is kind of fitting. But let's go ahead and check out all of the regular season stats for Jayden Daniels and the New York Giants. Jayden Daniels, I think that is the highest amount of passing yards we've ever seen from him, 4,223 passing yards, 30 passing touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. Definitely a pretty solid year. Sammy Smiley, he was also a former Commander, so I guess a family reunion is going on in Dallas or something. Jayden Daniels with 376 yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. Isaiah Slate looks like he's going to be the main guy for the New York Jets. 1,219 and then 11 receiving touchdowns. And then also Darnell Savage with 5 receiving touchdowns. So let's go ahead and take a look at Jayden Daniels' career, since, like I said, this is most likely going to be the end of it. I mean, we are technically 16 years deep in the future. Still a very great career for Jayden Daniels. But again, it does kind of suck the Pro Bowl is kind of wacky in Madden 25 because, realistically, this guy should have way more than 1 Pro Bowl appearance. I would say at least 7, maybe 6, 7, 8. He definitely is deserving of it. And it's official, Jayden Daniels has retired after 16 years in the NFL. He spent the majority of his career with the Commanders, but the very last season of his career, he was a New York Jet. Let me know if you guys think Jayden Daniels had a Hall of Fame career or not. We're going to go ahead and take a deeper dive of all of his statistics. So looking at the Commanders, He is all-time in the passing yards for the Commanders, all-time for passing touchdown in the Commanders' history, and all-time in the rushing yards for Commanders' history. I thought that was really interesting that it wasn't a running back. It's actually a quarterback, Jayden Daniels. So he was able to do it with 8,508 rushing yards, 367 passing touchdowns, makes him the leader for the Commanders' history, and passing yards with 51,840 yards. So, very solid career. Definitely a Commanders great. I mean, he was able to bring them a Super Bowl, which is always a big deal. Obviously, if you're making a case for the Hall of Fame. But, yeah, definitely go into the Commanders Hall of Fame, and I think he should be going into the regular Hall of Fame. I feel like he's definitely worthy of it. Let me know what you guys think. Again, we're going to go ahead and put all of his career accomplishments and statistics up on the screen, because don't forget, that isn't his full career. He did have a year with the New York Jets. So 56,063 passing yards he was able to accomplish in his career, 397 passing touchdowns, 166 interceptions. That is a little bit of interceptions to the passing touchdowns. Ratio could have been a tad better, but that's just me nitpicking. I mean, it's still not bad. 884 rushing yards, and still obviously really good. Accomplishments, he was able to get a Super Bowl and a Super Bowl MVP. Only one Pro Bowl, which again, I've said sucks because, the Pro Bowl is kind of whack in Madden 25. Then he was in a 2024 Offensive Rookie of the Year, and he had 8 total playoff appearances, technically 2 Super Bowl appearances, but he only won one of them. And go ahead and look at what he's leading in. He is first all-time in Commanders pass yards, first all-time in Commanders passing touchdowns, first all-time in Commanders rushing yards. Again, that's really impressive, him leading in rushing yards. But to think about it, I guess the Commanders didn't really have anybody too historic at running back. I mean, I guess Adrian Peterson, or maybe Clinton Portis, but again, I guess Jayden Daniels just outperformed them. Anyway, that is around the end of the video. Make sure you guys go ahead and leave a like and subscribe for more Madden 25 content, NFL analysis in general. If you guys are interested in football, make sure you leave a like and subscribe. Turn those post notifications on so you get notified every single time we post. Bye!